Hello, everybody, and welcome to Peaches and Power Bombs. I am one of your hosts, Majestic Marie, and there we go. I have to get my DDP yoga mirroring right there. Alora Preslee is here as well, and we have a very special guest for this Halloween edition of Peaches and Power Bombs. The Killbilly, Nathan Mowery, is here with us. Welcome.
What's up, y'all? Happy to be here. It'll be fun.
Yeah,
Happy
yeah,
Halloween.
yeah. Happy Halloween. So Alora, how are you doing this evening?
Well, I believe you are
Oh,
muted.
yes.
Or speaking really
That
quiet.
was me. Sorry.
That's okay.
I did it again. Anyways,
It
yeah,
happens.
everything's good. Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm glad for the chilly weather. That's just me because I hate hot weather. And so we're
I
very excited to have you on and um, know all about what you do and death matches and all that good fun stuff.
Absolutely.
yes, our viewers who normally join us is probably having their jaw dropped right now because they know how much deathmatch means to me.
Mm,
I usually uh, don't watch all that much,
yeah, it's definitely
but
not for everybody.
no, but you know what? It's okay because I respect all wrestling and everybody who decides to put their bodies on the line. So thank you for that, for our entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
But for anybody who doesn't maybe know who Nathan Mowery is, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, my name is Nathan Mowery. I wrestle as a guy named the Killbilly. I'm a filmmaker for a living, so that's what I do with most of my time. I work with I work for Diamond Dallas Page at DDP Yoga. I've been there for 10 years. That's like my day job. And then on the weekends, I like to just get crazy and get cut up with all my buddies. And so that's usually what I'm doing. So I'm either working for Dallas, doing some crazy thing on the weekend, or shooting a music video. So that's how I spend most of my time on this earth, and I very much enjoy every second of it.
And you also directed the music video for Fozzy for Chris Jericho, right? For Judas as well, right?
Yes, yeah, I directed the Judas video, and I was also in the Judas video. If
Oh,
you look,
really?
there's a guy on fire running in the background, and that would be me. So
Of course, you are on fire.
that's also, yeah, another thing to add to that thing I just mentioned earlier. I'm also a big fan of fire, so there could be a good chance that I set myself on fire any given weekend. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, big fan of that. But yeah, I've done I think 4 Fozzy videos, but Judas was obviously their big music video and big song and just big hit, and that was super awesome.
So, talking about that, and it- it's really cool that you did direct the Judas video. As you know, Judas is a big hit with Fozzy, and of course, all the fans sing Judas when Chris Jericho comes out. So, just as anybody that listens to music knows the music video is just as important. So, how does it make you feel as the director of that video to see what popularity it has brung all around? How does that make you feel in terms of that?
Oh, it's awesome. And let's see. Um, 1 second. My Facebook Messenger's open. Probably should close that. But yeah, like when I first met Chris, him and the band Fozzy, like they kind of came by DDP Yoga, and they saw the studio space where we do all the workouts and a lot of our filming. And Jericho's looking around. He's like, "Man, this would be a good place to film a music video." And then Dallas and Steve Yu, who's the president of DDP Yoga, Dallas's business partner, suggested like, "Oh, Nathan, he's one of our guys. He does a lot of music videos and everything for kind of local bands and stuff, and like he should be your guy. He's like a big rock and metal kind of guy." And Jericho was like, "Okay, cool. Yeah, let me get your number or whatever." And then it just felt like a cute girl asked me for my number, and I was just like, "Oh man."
Of course.
Yeah, so I gave him a number, and he gave me like there's an old Guns N' Roses music video called Garden of Eden, and
Hmm.
wanted to pay tribute to that. So the video is kind of an homage to that music video, but he wanted to have like some extra gimmicks and stuff in the background. So I came up with just a bunch of random things to throw in: dancing clowns, a little person with a fan, just all sorts, me on fire, all sorts of stuff. And and then one of the dancers like that are in the back, her name is Alicia Taylor, and she's like the leader of the Cherry Bombs, and that's another group that I do a lot of video and stuff for. And I met her at that shoot, and then we hit it off and became like best friends. And it was when I first was doing that music video, got asked to do the music video. I remember being like, oh man, like let me go look at their last music video they put out, which was Sandpaper, and that had over 1 million views. And I remember thinking to myself, oh man, I can make a music video that could have over 1 million views if this goes well. And that was like a goal for me. And I was super excited. And it was like the first like few days it hit like 1 million views, and I was just not expecting it. And now it has like 60 million or something ridiculous. And it was just such like, it felt for me like I've always wanted to work as a filmmaker and also work in pro wrestling. And I feel like the Judas video, having the success it did, kind of helped me do both, because it made people be like, okay, yeah, maybe Nathan knows what he's doing as far as making music videos. And a lot of people kind of hired me off of that. And I think I've earned Jericho's trust. And so he's brought me back for a lot of other kind of different projects and stuff. So yeah, it was, I'm very thankful for the Judas music video and song, and Fozzy and Chris in general. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. There was a couple times where I think the confetti from that music video fell onto my yoga mat when I would come in for a class or something. So I'd be like, where is that coming from? And they're like, oh, that was just from the Judas music video. I was like, oh, okay. So that's cool.
Yeah, it was like we had like right when it hits like the last big chorus, we had a bunch of like, confetti cannons go off, and it's like all up in the lights every now and again. And that was like 6 years ago. So it's still kind of just, you'll be in there and setting up some lights, and then you'll have this little like piece of confetti fly down.
Yeah, I think the last time I was there, I looked up and I could still see a little bit in the rafters, and I was like, it is still there after all this time. It's really funny. So how did you talked about your filmmaking and of course like that, but how did you get into wrestling? Have you always been a fan of wrestling?
So I've been like a fan of wrestling since I kind of got into it a little bit later, at least by the, being a Southern guy standards. So most people get into it like when they're a really little kid, but I didn't get into it until I was like 14. And then that's when it really like, I thought it was awesome when it was 14. It was by happenstance. I remember I was just watching TV and I was just flipping through channels, and then I stopped and I came across Edge versus Matt Hardy having a street fight on Monday Night Raw. And then I was just like watching that, blown away, jaw dropped. And that was the match, I don't know if you remember, where Matt Hardy does a side effect off the side of the stage and they go through all the electrical equipment and there's like sparks and stuff going off. And I was just like, being a 14-year-old kid, like, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened in the history of humanity, and I'm going to love it for the rest of my life. And I have. So it's that I was hooked then. I've been obsessed ever since.
So why go ahead, Alora. I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, so I want to know why deathmatch wrestling, and maybe how did you get into it? How did you start training and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm like you were saying before the podcast, I'm also a fan of all genres of wrestling. Like I love British style of like strong style. I love lucha. I love women's wrestling. I love just all forms of wrestling. But deathmatch has always been the thing that I've always gravitated towards. Always been a big fan of since being a teenager. And I've always been like, because with my age group, I kind of grew up like a fan of Jackass. So I've always been like a huge fan of people intentionally putting themselves in dangerous situations. And there was just something very thrilling about that you can't fake, like flirting with death and flirting with disaster. And that's something I've always found really fascinating and exciting. It's the same reason people watch NASCAR. They watch some kind of contact sport, because a lot of people just want to see like, all right, there is a possibility of death or destruction, and it just makes it a little bit more exciting, if that makes any sense. But for me, like my first exposure to deathmatch wrestling. Like where I'm from like East Tennessee. I grew up in Polk County, Tennessee.
Okay.
So far back in the woods, my parents just got the internet like 2 years ago. Like it's like I did not have internet access. So I was at my aunt's house one day, just on YouTube, and I'm just looking up every random wrestling thing ever. And I come across a video of Sick Nick Mondo, who was a really big deathmatch wrestler in the early 2000s. Debatably Mount Rushmore, like really, really good. And I'm watching this thing called Tournament of Death, which is a big deathmatch tournament that happens every year by a company called CZW. And one year I guess the first Tournament of Death, he was in the finals, and he like is just up on like the ropes, and they just busted light tubes, and so broken glass was already blowing my mind. And then this dude brings out a weed whacker and just cuts Nick Mondo in the stomach. And I'm like 15, 16 years old. Like that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. And just the feeling and the emotion that I felt seeing that, it was just so exciting and so thrilling. And then so I was just such a hyper kid. So you have me being hyper, me being obsessed with Jackass and deathmatch wrestling. Johnny Knoxville and John Zandig are like my childhood heroes, and those are terrible, terrible influences on a teenage boy, sports mind like me. So, and then I got a camera, and then I started filming me and my friends just jumping off of stuff. I grew up next to like a sawmill, and so we just had all this old wood. So I would make makeshift tables, and me and my brothers would just throw each other through tables. And then one time, my friend from church, was working at this factory, and he was throwing all these old light tubes away. So he came by my house one day with like 300 light tubes in his like truck, and he's like, "Hey man, I figured you might want this." I'm like, "Yeah, I definitely do."
No.
So just me and my brothers would just be in the backyard busting each other with tubes and setting each other on fire. It's always been something I've been drawn to. I don't know. I just kind of like dangerous and sketchy situations. I've always really loved it. But then, I got older, and then I moved to Atlanta. And when I was 19, started working for Dallas when I was like 20. And just being around Dallas, I was just around a lot of wrestling and a lot of wrestlers. And it was like living out my dream of interacting with these people who I had action figures of. And I've been working for Dallas for over 10 years now. And in 2018, AEW started. And so we were involved with like AEW. We were kind of like their video team, and Dallas kind of helped us to AEW in ways for us to kind of make videos to hype up for the first pay-per-view. And I remember talking to QT Marshall like backstage, and I knew that he had like a wrestling school because we were filming with him a lot. And I was just like, "Hey man, I was curious, how much is your wrestling school?" And he was just like, "Well," he's like, "Why, are you interested?" And I was like, "You know what, I might be. I might want to come check it out and feel it out." And then I came by and I did a few classes, and then and I kind of went inconsistently at first, and then COVID happened, and then I kind of just gave up on it, and I didn't really think about it for another year. And then Luther, who I'm a good friends with, and I've met through AEW and Jericho. They're really good buddies, and me and him just really hit it off. And he was like, "Hey man, I just moved to Atlanta, and I'm actually going to start working at the Nightmare Factory." And he's like, "If you want, like, I can like train you and everything if you want to continue doing this." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that'd be awesome." And I was still kind of like, "God, do I really want to do like that? Do I want to do deathmatch wrestling?" And Michaela, my girlfriend, my lovely girlfriend, who you guys know, she bought me a cameo. There was one day I was like so bummed out and torn up about it. I was just like, I don't know, like, are people going to think I'm just some evil masochist or some kind of psycho just doing deathmatch? I got really in my head about it, and I started to care way too much about what other people thought. And then Michaela bought a cameo from Nick Gage, who is like,
wow,
if you're into wrestling at all, you at least know the name Nick Gage. He's kind of like, he's the man when it comes to deathmatch wrestling.
Yeah.
And so it's him hyping me up and saying things I probably shouldn't quote on this podcast, but he was it just like really lit a fire under me. I was like, "Oh my God, yes, this is awesome." And so then I started training with Luther, and Luther was an FMW, which was basically where deathmatch kind of started or really grew to prominence in the early 90s in Japan. by Onita, and
Mhm.
he wrestled for that company. If you've ever seen the videos of Terry Funk and Onita and the exploding barbed wire rings, like Luther was a part of that company. So,
Okay.
and I'm like, he's like, I'm not a legend. I'm like, anybody that worked at FMW is a legend to me. So for me getting, you know, learning from an FMW wrestler, that was just kind of really cool to me. And paired with the cameo that Michaela got, and then I just started going. And I should make it. There's also, sorry, a little. I know this is a very long-winded answer.
No,
Uh,
it's fine.
but in 2018, also, like, I think the thing that really inspired me to become a wrestler, like a lot of people are like, yeah, I saw Ricky Steamboat versus, the Macho Man at WrestleMania 3. That was the best match. And that's what made me become a wrestler. For me, it wasn't that match. Like, a lot of people will cite all these big time WWE matches, but the match that made me go, this is amazing, and this is what I want to do, was Nick Gage versus Effie at GCW / Black Label Pro 2-Cup Stuffed in Chicago. And I was there in the crowd watching Effie and Nick Gage just tear it up, do the most dangerous and crazy stuff. And I'm like, this is like, I've already loved wrestling my whole life, but this style of wrestling, this is the coolest thing ever to me. And so then Michaela gets me that cameo, and then Luther moves to Atlanta. So everything just fell into place. I'm like, you know what? For me, like, I kind of grew up always thinking way too much about what other people thought about me. And now that I got older, I realized that, if you live for the approval of man, you die by his rejection. So you have to kind of just do your own kind of thing, and not, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. People are going to mock you or criticize you or talk down to you, whether you do something or not. And I believe that there's two types of people in the world. There's the oh wells and the what ifs. There's the people who will say, oh, what if I did that? Or what if I pursued that? And there's the oh wells, well, I pursued that and it didn't work out, and I fell flat on my face. But I'd rather fly flat on my face and embarrass myself than be 80, 90 years old, if I make it that far, and then think about the things that I could have done. So I'd much rather be an oh well. And that's always been my message to people. Like, pursue what it is that you want to do, because you only get so many laps around the sun, and then it's all over with no redos or second takes. So you just got to find the thing that makes your soul sing and pursue it. And for me, that was deathmatch wrestling and filmmaking. So now I get so much, you get hate being a deathmatch wrestler. Everybody is just commenting like, oh, all that for a hot dog and a handshake? Like it's the first time. Like, oh my God, come up with a different insult. That's the only thing deathmatch haters will ever say. But yeah, I'm just super passionate.
We will get to that question here in a little bit, because that was actually something we both wanted to ask. But the one thing I wanted to ask, you mentioned Terry Funk, and recently he passed away, unfortunately, and he was known as a well-rounded wrestler, and he did dabbled into the hardcore / deathmatch style a little bit. My question would be, has he influenced you in any way in terms of your building your craft as a deathmatch wrestler?
Oh, 1000%. I think if you're a deathmatch wrestler and you're not watching Terry Funk, you're doing yourself a disservice. Because I think a really common criticism about deathmatch wrestling is that there's no storytelling or psychology or anything like that connected to it. And I would heavily argue that, because it's like, well, what's the difference between like a PG-13 movie and an R-rated like horror movie? It's like, is there a certain level of brutality where you can't tell stories anymore? Like, that never made sense to me. Like, so Terry Funk was always like, and in my opinion, this is my personal opinion, I think Terry Funk is the greatest wrestler of all time. I think he's the greatest wrestler that's ever lived, like, in my opinion. And so when people are like, yeah, deathmatch wrestling, that's just, a bunch of BS. There's no story. Only idiots do that don't tell, no psychology. I'm like, you're going to look me dead in the eyes, dead in the soul, and tell me that Terry Funk can't tell a story or have a good match, even in the context of deathmatch wrestling? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, so yeah, huge fan of Terry Funk. Obviously, I love his stuff with, obviously in FMW with Onita. And I think, like, if people want to get into deathmatch wrestling, I think a good match to look up is Terry Funk versus Cactus Jack, King of the Deathmatch, 1995, IWA Japan, Kawasaki Dream. It's like, It is one of the most famous death matches. It's on YouTube, uploaded.
Mm-hmm.
Go look it up if you haven't seen that. And that's a good introductory match to just good deathmatch wrestling.
Yeah, Cactus Jack Mick Foley, he's definitely, when you think of death match, he definitely comes in the conversation too. Yes.
Yeah, huge Terry Funk mark over here. and
I think we all are.
I know you kind of already touched on it, but if you could go a little bit more into detail, one of our questions was we were going to play devil's advocate just a little bit, and we were going to bring up some of those points and just say that those opposed to that style of wrestling say those things, like there is no story, there's no build to it, because it's just all violent matches all the time, and it's all unnecessary violence too. Like, you're really hurting, y'all are really putting your bodies on the line here. So we want to acknowledge that as well. So what do you say a little bit more into detail to those people who always say those types of things?
Well, I think like we were saying earlier, I think one, deathmatch wrestling is not for everybody. I see deathmatch wrestling kind of being the more punk rock of wrestling. And the punk rock and music, it's like you have your top 40 and you have punk rock. You have the thing that won't be on mainstream radio. It's a lot of DIY, guys doing themselves, guys who don't really have that much intention of getting rich and famous, but just do it for the love of the game. And it's rowdy and it's more fringe and it's a little bit outlaw and rebellious. And it kind of speaks to a lot of hearts like mine in a lot of senses. And so I've come to realize that a lot of people are not wired that way. They don't like it, and that's fine. Everyone has their own opinion, and they could very well, not like it. If you don't like deathmatch, don't watch it. But if you hate something, why waste your energy just like cutting down other people who are into it? For me, it's why it makes me super happy. But yeah, as far as like, and what was the question? Sorry, I forgot. I just went on a small little rant. I forgot what the initial question was.
It was just what do you say to those people who kind of bring up those points, that there is no story and that it's just unnecessary violence?
I mean, I definitely think you can tell really cool stories. I mean, like some of my favorite movies of all time are, violent, like all these old dudes in their 50s, like, oh, you deathmatch, you can't tell a story. I'm like, yo, your favorite movies like Rambo First Blood or The Predator or whatever from the 80s. That's an R-rated violent movie. Heads are being blown off. You like watch The Terminator. What's the difference between, people just blowing each other up with guns in a movie and then people just stabbing each other with like barbecue skewers? It's like I like the idea of, bringing in more realism like to wrestling. And I think deathmatch, not to say that I don't think deathmatch is better than any other style. It's just what I personally prefer. But, if you're watching someone fight and they bring out, wooden barbecue skewers and they stick it and they stab you in the head and they hit it until it punctures you and stays in there and hangs out. Like, to me, that's a very memorable, striking visual. And I think it's more like you can tell stories, but you could also have some cool visual based kind of stuff. So it's kind of like I said, it's kind of, I always compare it to punk rock, and just because something's violent doesn't mean it's void of story or substance.
And I think it's like anything with wrestling. When you boil it down, it's about making the people care about you as well. Mm-hmm. And like I always say that deathmatch is not my cup of tea. I respect it, but it's just not. But it's funny because a lot of my favorite wrestlers over the years, my favorite wrestler when I was growing up was Mick Foley. And now my favorite wrestler is Eddie Kingston, and he does ridiculous stuff that I'm like, I love you, Eddie, but I can't watch that right now.
No, absolutely.
Are you still alive? Okay, you're still alive. We're good. But it's just about, if you make people invested into your character and who you are and what you're doing, it almost doesn't really matter what you're doing out there. They're going to watch it no matter what.
Absolutely. And like it's a smaller fan base for sure, like than regular wrestling, but also punk rock and hardcore and heavy metal is like smaller fan base than pop music. And I think a lot of times people have one way of looking at wrestling or art in general. In my opinion, being an artist, I think that art is subjective. And like just because you're not into it doesn't mean it sucks,
Right.
So I think like for instance, if you measure good music by how much it sounds like Katy Perry or Taylor Swift, and then you listen to like the Misfits or Black Flag, and you'd probably think those bands suck because they don't sound anywhere remote to the blueprint that you've already set in your mind and determined what music is. So like if people say like, okay, well, Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, that is what wrestling is. Like if it's anything else, like that is wrestling. It's so closed in. And for me, I think you have to think outside of the box and open your mind to new horizons and like mix styles and genres and bring outside influences into wrestling and do things differently. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's really cool. And some people just don't get it, and that's fine. I'm down to, be harassed on the internet for my style of wrestling because it's what I love. And like I said, people are just not going to get it, and people just like looking down on people. So if you ain't got anybody to look down on, help yourself to me.
Well, how do you feel about AEW kind of inviting all different kinds of styles of wrestling? It's not just like your traditional American wrestling, and it's not just this. It's like they take a little bit of everything. They have some lucha, they have some strong style. They do the traditional, American style wrestling as well. They do the British style wrestling, and they also, on occasions, as I have said before, they do quite a few hardcore / death matches. How do you feel about them bringing that kind of light onto deathmatch wrestling and on a big stage like that?
So like in the deathmatch community, it's polarizing that when AEW does it. But for me personally, I absolutely love it. I think it's awesome. I love that. Like the thing that I love is being shared by, a lot of people, and a lot of people are kind of understanding it when it's presented on a bigger stage. A lot of people want it to be keep it underground forever, which I totally get. It's kind of like, oh, you want your favorite band to not, play stadium.
Sign their big record label, yeah.
You want to see them at the local club or local bar, and it's kind of like your special little area and place. And like, but I love it because like we had Chris Jericho versus Nick Gage on TV. Nick Gage had his pizza cutter against Chris Jericho. It was a fever dream like that. Like they're like, what has happened? Like I can't believe that happened.
The Domino's commercial aired right side by side with it too.
Oh yeah,
it was great.
Legendary. Like I like that was in I think North or South. It was one of the Carolinas, and I drove up to that show to see Nick Gage and Jericho. And like you do the blood and guts like War Games match they do. Like John Moxley, he's bringing out like a bed of nails. Like he took skewers at the big UK show and everything all in. And like I'm a huge fan, and it's one of those things where I feel like deathmatch is probably the most neglected form of wrestling. Like people have very strong opinions on it, and a lot of times people don't care for it. So so it doesn't really get included. But I think people like it, and my friends who are not into wrestling like deathmatch wrestling because it's just a spectacle at the end of the day. And I have a lot of friends like that are into like horror movies and stuff, and it's basically like a live action horror movie in a lot of ways. Like I just wrestled Cruel at the Biker Rally. That felt like I was in a horror movie being chased by a monster, So like there is stories. I love it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned John Moxley because if you want to talk about somebody not somebody that's current, he would be one that would be an example of someone who could be well-rounded, kind of like Terry Funk and Mick Foley and, all the others. He's well-rounded. He definitely knows how to play his character, and he can definitely tell a story. So with Moxley, a lot of people give him, I'm pretty sure you see it on social media, people give him a hard time. They say, oh, he plays every week and da-da-da-da-da. Y'all get that kind of comments too? Or like
that's...
Oh, you just want to bleed and...
Yeah, because it's like some people just don't get it and they want to cut you down, and when they're insulting you and they realize that you're not giving into it, they just try to find ways of making you feel bad about it. So they're like, oh yeah, well you bleed every time. I'm like, yeah, I'm a deathmatch wrestler. That's what I do. I bleed a lot. And it's like, and we're simulating
it's in the description.
Yeah, and it's like if we're supposed to be simulating this big violent fight and we're throwing punches at each other and we're not being busted open, I think that's against the realism of it all. I think if you're getting pummeled in the face over and over and you bleed, that just makes sense. I think that is more, that psychology checks out more than not bleeding in a lot of ways. And I get wanting to hold off on blood to like a big blow off kind of thing. But like I said, I'm just like, I love Mox, and a lot of people give Mox a hard time, but I also think it's the polarizing wrestlers that are the most successful because people have really strong opinions on Mox, and I think that what makes them stand out. And people can, talk shit about Mox all day long. He was number one in the PWI like last year or whatever it was, like, and that was a death match.
He was in the top 3 this year too.
Yeah, so it's like, well, that's your proof that deathmatch wrestling can work. Here we got Moxley, number 1 in the world, like working AEW, and still does like the occasional GCW match. Like he'll still go wrestle Nick Gage at GCW and put on a crazy match, and that is incredible to me. So yeah, huge Jon Moxley fan, and I love everything he's doing, representing deathmatch in the mainstream, much like Mick Foley did in the previous generation and Terry Funk did in the generation before that.
Now, I have to admit, sometimes here on the show, when we're either having a watch along or we're doing a preview of something for AEW, we will kind of play a game and be like, okay, when do y'all think that Jon Moxley's going to start bleeding? And we'll like, oh, you win.
Kind of
you were the
wrestling
closest.
Community.
He started bleeding 45 seconds into the match. You win. So, we have some fun, but we don't look down on any of the wrestlers. We try not to, or anything like that. So, speaking of Jon Moxley, maybe he's one of the answers to this next question. We will see, but we kind of want to know, what is some of your goals in wrestling as far as opponents or places or anything like that?
Yeah, so I have a lot. So initially my goal was just to be a wrestler. And now it's like, oh, I'm in it. Now I'm like a year and a half in. And now I'm starting to like travel a lot more, and like so I'm like, okay, well, this is like something I want to, do kind of long term, and let's set some goals. Dallas is a big goals guy. So we don't think it, ink it. So I have like all the notes that I want to do. One would be to have a death match in Japan, to be flown out on someone else's dime, to just have a gory, violent match out in Japan, just because that's where Terry Funk went. That's where Onita started it. That's where FMW was. Like, if I could go have just a crazy match in Japan, that would be my big dream. So that, or like, and there's other goals like being in CZW Tournament of Death. Like, Tournament of Death has been around for 20 years. I've been a big fan of it since a teenager. That's my goal, is to be in Tournament of Death one day. And another goal I have is to win the American Deathmatch title. To me, that's the title for me. That's the title I want to go for. That would mean more to me than beating John Cena for the WWE title at WrestleMania. If I could win the American Deathmatch title, which is held by ICW No Holds Barred, which you can watch on IWTV. It's my personal favorite deathmatch company in America. It's super good. So if you ever just want to like dabble in deathmatch, that's the company I recommend, ICW. But that, and I guess as far as opponents, I have a big list. I really want to wrestle Nick Gage. Like, I know he's at the tail end of his career, and I'm kind of starting mine. So I hope I get enough, I hope I'm good enough or worthy enough or work up to having a match with Nick Gage before he decides to wrap it up. Obviously, Jon Moxley would be crazy. Like, he is like at the forefront. He's kind of the face of deathmatch wrestling in a lot of ways right now, at least to the mainstream. So Mox, Gage would be huge. Man, I have a huge list. Onita, even though Onita's like 80 years old, he's still out there wrestling and doing explosion matches. Like, he just blew up Joey Janela like a month ago. Like,
wow.
And I see Joey Janela posted on Facebook, and I'm just like insanely jealous. Like, man, only in deathmatch would you be jealous of another person getting like an arm infection from an explosion. I was like, it could have been me. But probably that, and hell, even Joey Janela, I'd like to wrestle him too, because like he was kind of like the face of GCW. He's just been on a crazy run, and people like love hating on Joey Janela, but I'm a huge Joey Janela fan. I think he's great. I think he's funny and creative. I think he has like such a unique mind for wrestling, and whether people want to like it or not, he is one of the more influential wrestlers the past few years. And so yeah, big Joey guy too. So I'll throw Joey in on that list. So that'd be my, I guess, top 3 as far as death matches go. But there's so many other ones I'd love to wrestle. Man, I could sit here and just rattle millions of them off. I mean, Schlack, Eric Ryan, Atticus Kogar, Takeda, Jun Kasai. All of these people would be so crazy. I'd like to do a death match with Effie. You know, he lives in Atlanta, and he goes so damn hard when he does death matches. I don't know if you've ever seen an Effie death match, but man, it is something. So, so probably those are like my main. I want to get, and I also want to do a no rope barbed wire match. I haven't never done one of those yet, and so that's also on the itinerary of my life. So that's what I want.
Only in deathmatch wrestling do you receive battle scars as a badge of honor.
That's very true. I was making that joke today with a lot of my coworkers because now I'm starting to get just like cuts and scars everywhere. I don't know if you can see, but it's just kind of like, it's almost like getting scars as a deathmatch wrestler is almost like friendship tattoos. You're like, oh, this is when I fought my friend Lilith. This is when I fought my friend Sean. You know, so where I wrestled Bam Bam Pondo. You know, so.
I work a labor intensive job. I work with livestock pigs, and I get bruises all the time. I'm like, hey, look what I got, and they're like, what is wrong with you?
So we have a lot of viewers from Puerto Rico, and we have a lot of friends in the wrestling business in Puerto Rico as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they are a very well-known place of being the crowds down there just love hardcore wrestling. Is that one place that you have been wanting to go at some point? Is maybe having a match in Puerto Rico?
That would be crazy. I'd be all about it. Yeah, if there's a spot, because like the origins of deathmatch wrestling is from 2 places. It's Puerto Rico and Memphis, Tennessee. That's where the birth of deathmatch happened. So you have like Bruiser Brody doing just crazy stuff down there, like in Puerto Rico, freaking fans out and stuff. And then you have the Tupelo concession stand brawl with Terry Funk, and actually I don't know if Terry Funk was in there. I forget, but I know Onita was, and like and that's where Onita got the idea for FMW, because like there was this one they were fighting in a concession stand. Like look it up on YouTube. Like and the crowd got so amped up and got so into it. There's this one woman who kicks Onita in the face with her heels, and it causes him to bleed like a lot. And just the visceral reaction of the crowd, Onita was like, there's a market for this. There's a market for this extreme violent style. And then he went to Japan, created FMW. ECW saw FMW and brought it over there. Then WWE saw ECW and created the Attitude Era. So a lot of it does kind of go back to deathmatch in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and ECW, we can't forget to mention that either, because I feel like for those that, like back in the 90s, internet was brand new, and you didn't have access to a lot of things like you do now. So I feel like in a way, ECW kind of brought it, I guess, mainstream in the mid 90s, well, early to mid 90s there. And obviously there's many that have put their talents forward in terms of hardcore. Some probably even did death matches. Were you inspired by any of those guys, like the Sandman, Sabu, New Jack? And,
absolutely. So when I got into wrestling, it was like 2004. So it was, and I think WWE brought back ECW in like 2005, 2006.
Well, yeah, that don't count. I'm talking about original.
So they started doing like, the ECW guys, we're going to have one night stand, and we're going to like, do a show with these old ECW guys, and they're all crazy hardcore people. And me just looking at stuff on YouTube, I'm like, okay, you have my attention. All right, let me learn more about this ECW. And then, they start showing Like, and then I think I got the DVD, like an ECW DVD, when One Night Stand came out. So it was One Night Stand, and then ECW's first original pay-per-view, Barely Legal. And I like watched both of those, and I'm like, well, this is awesome. I'm gonna like watch more of this, like seeing Taz and Bam Bam Bigelow like go through the staging, or Spike Dudley being thrown into the crowd and crowd surfing, or just Tommy Dreamer and RVD. Sabu is the coolest human being of all time. Like him just going through tables. Terry Funk and Sabu no rope barbed wire is the best, most iconic no rope barbed wire of all time. Like that when Sabu gets his arm just ripped open, then he has just meat hanging out, and he calls for a guy, tapes himself up, and keeps fighting. Like when you're a 16-year-old dude and you're watching this, you're like,
this is so cool.
God, this is amazing. What is this? You know, like it's the coolest thing ever to like a teenage boy. You're like, I'm going to tell my parents, like, you know, Terry Funk just thinks Sabu into the barbed wire. They're like, okay, Nathan, calm down. Like but it just got such a reaction and thrill out of me. And I feel like there's just a lot of people who are wired similar that love just things that are super shocking and exciting. And ECW. And I discovered ECW right at the same time I discovered CZW, and CZW was in the same area that kind of started right after ECW went under. And so that's what, you know, Nick Mondo and Nick Gage and all those guys were over there. And I know a big fan of New Jack as well. I've always loved New Jack. He would just, because he felt so legitimate. And if people say that, like, you can't tell stories or feel legitimate, like, New Jack is the most real wrestler of all time. Yeah. There's nothing about him that feels phony or made up or a pro wrestler. He is just a legitimate, vicious, like, human. And he's the most believable wrestler of all time, I think. And I'm obsessed with New Jack. And I hate that he passed away before.
Yeah, R.I.P. His Dark Side of the Ring was really good, and I caught that like right after he died. And but it was really good. And you mentioned Taz and Bam Bam Bigelow. And when they did the Dark Side of the Ring on Bam Bam, Taz was on there, and he did talk about that match. So
yeah, it's so cool. And that's the cool thing about AEW, because I like grew up watching Taz, and you see Hook doing like the same kind of Taz plexes and stuff.
Yeah, he learned from the best.
Cool,
such natural. He is such a natural. I'm like, oh yeah, you definitely learned from your dad.
And he's just like the most effortlessly cool person. You know what I mean? Like he just walks out, and it's just like, okay, that kid is so damn cool, and he doesn't have to try. You know?
Yeah, I love it. It was so funny when he actually made his debut, and just the way his performance was shocked everybody. You could tell Taz was a proud papa. He was trying not to let it show, or you could hear it in his voice, but you knew he was a proud papa that night.
I love it. That'd be so cool.
He just comes out there and like throws people around, fluffs out his hair, and goes home.
There you go. People love it.
There you go.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I don't have hair like Hook, so I got to resort to stabbing people. So it's a little harder for people.
Yeah. So I want to get a little bit personal. We talked. You recently had a match with Dylan, or as people know him as his Sunny Days, at Southern Honor. And Southern Honor, if no one knows, is a place here right outside of Atlanta, and it's a promotion that you kind of helped get off the ground. And I remember I went to a lot of the shows the first year and stuff, and then I just got out of the habit of going and then go back. But anyway, how is it you were kind of just like the photographer and kind of like helping backstage and stuff like that, to actually getting to be on the show and having a really big match with Sunny Days in death match? How was that? How did that feel?
Yeah, it was incredible. So in real life, like when I became a wrestler, Dylan was just kind of like, I don't know if you should do it. He was kind of, discouraging of it a little bit, because he didn't want, to lose a camera guy at Southern Honor. And hey man, know your role. You're a camera guy, so it kind of just bothered me. And then like it was one of those things where I just kept training, and I kept going every week and kept learning. And I was like, hey man, put me in. And Dylan would put me in like the Rumble Jack, which we have this thing called the Rumble Jack, which is like the Royal Rumble, and at the very end, two people comes like a what's it called, like a lumberjack match. And then so Dylan would put me in that, and then I had one death match against Tank, and then yeah, and so one day Dylan shows up at practice, and he just starts attacking me, and like just starts beating me up, and he just gets like a cat of nine tails made of barbed wire, and he just starts whipping me with it like at practice, and it like started ripping my skin. It actually hit me in the eye and cut my eyebrow pretty bad. And he's like, "So you want to be a wrestler, huh? This is what you want to be. You want to be a wrestler?" And like he says that like I haven't been, going state to state, doing death matches every weekend, going crazy, bleeding my guts out all the time. And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I want to be a wrestler." And so we had a sit down, and you're like, "All right, we got our whole company. We should just do a match and just settle this, And so me and Dylan, like, we're really close, but we had a lot of like heat going into it. And then yeah, we had that match at Still Here 5, which is our big anniversary show we have every year. And I wanted to not only prove to Dylan that I was a wrestler, but that I'm also a killer. And I also know that Dylan has that in him himself. And so I was like, all right, dude, look, we both have demons, so let's exercise them in this match. And I want to pull that out of you. And he did. And he definitely did. So I don't know if you could tell, but I still have some gusset marks right there from the match. So he's just punched a gusset into my face. Funny side story about that gusset, by the way. Dylan gets a gusset plate. And for those who are not familiar with deathmatch wrestling, a gusset plate is kind of like a metal plate, little rectangle. It has like sharp metal teeth, and it's like what you put in wood to hold the framing of houses together. It's not supposed to be going to someone's forehead. So Dylan punches that into my head. I start gushing. I use a hacksaw all the time. That's like my signature weapon in deathmatch. So he brings out a hacksaw, and he starts hacking my face up with a hacksaw. And then after the match, like I'm at my merch table, and this lady walks up to me, and she's just like, "I know that blood isn't real." And then she gets her finger and she like swipes it on my blood and takes a big confident lick of my blood. And then immediately her eyes just like get wide with regret. And then she's like, "Oh my God, that is real blood." And I'm just like thrown off by the whole interaction. And I'm just like, yeah, like of course.
That's probably like the weirdest interaction.
It was so weird and threw me so off. I didn't know how to react to it. I was like, this lady just licked my blood. That's super gross. But yeah. And then she was like, "Oh my God, that's real. I thought that was fake blood." I'm like, "No, I legitimately got stabbed, and that's legitimately my blood that I'm just pissing off." And then she bought a shirt, so it was cool. So all good.
Well, at least she bought a shirt and made it worth it.
So I'm a favorite deathmatch wrestler now. But
yeah.
But the match with Dylan, it's up on IWTV, Southern Honor Wrestling, Still Here 5. And I also put that match up on my YouTube for free. So you guys can go check that out. It's out now, actually, since this will be out on, Halloween. So go over to my YouTube channel, add Nathan Mowery. I have most of my matches, or at least the ones I'm not embarrassed by, up on my YouTube. So you can watch all of my crazy antics and watch me get stabbed in various variety. So,
well, and that match to me is a perfect example of people who say that there is no story in deathmatch. Y'all told a really good story leading up to that. I saw all of y'all's stuff on social media and everything, and I was like, and with that built-in history there too, of y'all working together for 10 plus years, and just helping each other, building up Southern Honor together and all that kind of stuff, and then leading on to this match. It's just a perfect example that yes, death matches can have story to it. So congratulations on that, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think, like obviously me and Dylan have our differences as you've seen in the match, but I think Dylan has such an underrated mind for wrestling. I think he's so creative, and he is. I will give him that. But I think I'm really happy with how that match, turned out. And Dallas, like DDP himself, did commentary for it, so he came out.
Wow.
Which I didn't know, by the way. Like there was rumblings about it, but I didn't know that was officially going down. And then the way I started the match, if you remember Southern Honor, there's like a big wall that divides the front part of the building and the back half. And so I'm like on the wall, and I do a big dive onto like Sonny and his minions. Wow. But and I'm like holding like on the ladder about to climb up, and then I hear Dallas's music hit, and he's cutting a promo, and I'm like, great, added pressure. Dallas is watching my match now. This is probably the first time he's ever actually watched a match of mine. And but he was so excited and so proud. His wife Paige bought a shirt. Like
That's great.
even in his commentary, because like I just got done editing the match, he was just at one point he's like, "Wow, this is way better than I thought it was going to be." And that popped me. I was like, "Man." Oh, and he also said like, "Oh, I knew Nathan when he in his early 20s. He used to be movie star handsome." And I'm like, "What are you saying, man? What the hell?" Yeah. He used to be. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, getting praise from Dallas. When you get it, it's you know that you actually deserve that because he just does not hand that out. There was one time I was training to be an instructor there at the PC, and I was doing the modifications for Garrett or King or somebody, and he comes out and he just stands there and watches us like this. And I was like, oh crap. And my heart rate goes up and everything. And then at the end, he goes, Teek, Teek, come here, come here. And I'm like, oh no, I just did something wrong. And he goes, you did a really good job. He gives me a big hug and he walks away. And I was like, oh wow, okay. So yeah, he doesn't just hand those out if they're not earned. So
definitely. And I love Dallas. He's like my crazy uncle, you know. He's like that guy I like all the time, and he just like has provided me with so many crazy moments and memories. And yeah, I can't say enough good stuff about the guy. He is like and as you know, I mean, you know, you've hung out with him plenty of times, and so you know his character and can speak to his character as well. But he is legitimate. He walks his talk. Yeah, I'm so thankful because I had a bunch of jobs beforehand, you know, when I was a teenager. I mean, I worked in factories and loaded trucks and did electric meter reading and stuff before I became a filmmaker, worked for Dallas. So thank God I'm not doing that anymore. And I, you know, owed that to a lot of that to Dallas. So yeah, I'll forever grateful for Dallas. I even have a tattoo representing Dallas in that whole era. So I have the snake to represent, you know, Jake the Snake, the razor for Razor Ramon, and the diamond for Diamond Dallas Page.
Nice.
Because the whole resurrection of Jake the Snake period of life was such a monumental, informative thing for me. So yeah, so I will forever love Dallas, whether I like it or not, because he's on my arm. So
I kind of feel left out. I haven't met Dallas yet.
Oh, he's the man. I'm sure you will at some point. He shows up.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Just come on up to Atlanta.
Yeah. Roll on up. He's the kindest person ever. I don't think he's ever turned down a photo or an autograph. So.
No, not that I know of.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to try to wind down here a little bit. So, Nathan, if you want to have anything to plug, what's next for you?
I got a lot of stuff going on. Too many things to handle. But if you want to, like, for those listening, if you want to follow me, I'm just at Nathan Mowery on everything. I have a lot of matches coming up that I'm proud of that I can't like speak of just yet. But if you want to check those out, I upload most of my matches to my YouTube channel, also at Nathan Mowery. I have some documentaries in the works that I can't talk about yet, but I'm working with Jericho on some more secret projects that I'm excited to announce here soon. So working with him on that, always working on stuff with the Cherry Bombs and their Girl Gang series, which is a cool story about women in the rock world and kind of navigating that. So that's on YouTube. So I'm about to finish up, I think, the 5th or 6th season of that. So, and that will be a cool web series. But yeah, mostly I'm just looking forward to, cutting people with glass and lighting myself on fire and dealing with internet trolls. So
that always sounds like a good time to me.
Yeah, I love it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come and hang out with us and talk about deathmatch wrestling and, yourself and everything. And we're just always happy to have great people like you come on the show.
Yes.
Thank you very much. It was really fun. And again, just like closing thought on deathmatch, like just give it a shot. Don't let other people's opinions of deathmatch sway you, or just give it a chance. There are genuine great stories and great wrestlers and great moments and memories to be had and experienced through the subgenre of wrestling known as deathmatch. I think it's the most exciting genre. So don't write it off. There is a lot of good stuff, and I do think that everybody could find a match in the deathmatch realm that they think is cool. So yeah, just check it out.
Even me, I even have one. So
do you? What is it? I'm curious. What?
I don't know if it's really deathmatch, but it was really violent, so I count it. The Lights Out Thunder Rosa versus Britt Baker match.
Oh yeah, that was good.
I thought that was really good.
That's
so.
definitely a deathmatch adjacent like type of match. So those women went hard. That's like one of the matches that got Michaela like super into like hardcore. So yeah,
cool.
So there's cool stuff. Yeah, something out there.
All right, as always, everybody, thank you so much for watching this episode of Peaches and Power Bombs. Please like, share, and subscribe. Do all the things on Facebook, on YouTube. We're on Instagram and Twitter as well. We need to do a little bit better at keeping those active, but we are going to do a lot better. Our YouTube channel has been getting a whole lot more active lately. One of our videos actually did get 8.1 thousand views on it. So thank you so much for that. Keep them coming, people. Keep coming onto Peaches and Power Bombs and giving us a like. All right, as always, guys, thank you so much, and we will see you guys later. Stay peachy. Bye.